Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another review here for Dead City Season 2. So this is my review of Episode 3, my full breakdown of the episode. So obviously, this video will contain spoilers for the episode, so hope you're all aware of that. And also, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be doing a video on the Episode 4 trailer, and also some videos talking about very specific things that happened in this episode here, because we learned of a new group here, and we actually learned a lot of, I guess, Hershel's motives right now, which is really interesting. And there's one thing about the character that I've always wondered. I think we've all wondered about how he felt about another character here. But yeah, his true feelings, I think, were revealed in this episode. And I do think that, yeah, things are going to get very interesting here the next couple of episodes. So this episode begins with a Dama and Hershel flashback, and honestly, I actually really do like how they told the story here of the flashback, because it happens throughout the episode, and I think it's hilarious because back in the day, honestly, I always criticized The Walking Dead for doing stuff like this. Like, I never liked the flashbacks throughout the episode, but I think because the spinoffs have been only like 6 episodes that like moments like this are really appreciated, I would say, because I would say early on with The Walking Dead, like, you know, just throughout the main show anyways, like you had 16 episodes. And so it was a lot of time to focus on like a backstory or whatever. Right. And so when you would get an episode that would focus on a backstory and have it play throughout, you know, I would criticize the pacing a lot because it was like, you know, we were waiting so long to get the story going because it was 16 episodes and now we're spending a lot of time doing this. And it was stuff that we didn't necessarily need to see. Well, I feel like I was actually wrong with that. I do think moments like that, honestly, do add a lot to the story. I think that it's honestly incredible that after 3 episodes, we're like not even halfway done the season. And I'm going to do a video, like I said last week, I'll do a video this week here talking about the fact that, you know, after 3 episodes here, normally this would be the halfway point of the season. And we're literally going into like the second half of the season here and ending like another arc or whatever, or going into another season. But it's honestly incredible that we have 5 more episodes left. Like, that's still so much time here with the story. I do wish that there was more of the story here. And I think that's the one thing that is honestly hurting The Walking Dead right now, is that the seasons aren't long enough to really be there, you know, with a story for a long time. And I think that that's one thing that everyone's sort of missing right now with The Walking Dead. And we're seeing it with Dead City right now. Now, this episode, I would say, for the most part, really focused on Hershel. I would say he was like the biggest character here of the episode because it focused a lot on his backstory somewhat. I mean, obviously, we know his backstory, but like it showed us what happened to Hershel throughout season 1. And it was something that we never really knew. You know, we were wondering what his motivations were because obviously we saw at the very end of episode 2 that he was the one that created the signal, I guess, to warn the Croat and Dama that New Babylon were on their way. And Maggie was wondering, like, why did Hershel do that, right? And yeah, just all of that there. And I will say that new group was really interesting. And I think the opening sequence where it ends with that new character that we saw in this episode, where she's like sort of like in the bushes there in the background and she's watching Hershel, that was creepy. Like, at first I didn't notice the character, but as soon as you do notice her, you're just like, whoa, what's going on here, right? But they're in the woods a lot this episode, and it looked absolutely amazing. I think that to go through all that tall grass and get that whole sequence there, and just being in the woods in general, like, I miss stories like that. I really do. I just miss those characters being in the woods. Like, I know that it was something that a lot of people complained about for a very long time, and yes, the city environments are very cool, but going back to the woods sometimes here and there, I think is honestly really just awesome. And I think it just gives you like that classic Walking Dead feel, because honestly, like seeing certain shots of them in the woods, it was just like, wow, I know that they're in the woods, but it looks way better than it did in the original show. And yeah, it was just really nice to see. One complaint I have, and it's not really a complaint with Dead City, it's sort of a complaint with walkers or people dying from walkers in general. And this has been going back to like, you know, the last however many seasons of The Walking Dead. Like, it does just feel like sometimes characters just randomly die super fast to a walker bite. And I just don't get it. You know, like, I think that it's sort of one of those things where they just choose when a character dies, right? Like, a character will die from a walker bite so fast, and like, you know, they literally just got bit and the walker's dead, right? And all of a sudden they're just like, that's it, they're gone. Like, I know later in this episode there's a character that Negan actually kills before he almost kills Hershel, and that character actually survived a lot of walker bites. But that's what I mean. It's just interesting when it comes to a lot of that, because I feel like it's not like one thing in general. It's just always like whatever works for the story. And I think that that's something that they should probably, I feel like, just have those, you know, certain things in place where it's like, if a character gets bit right away, like they're not going to die immediately from a walker, right? Like it's going to take some time, so just don't have them die right away. And I think it just makes the story more believable. I think that that was the one thing that, at least early on in this episode, and again, it's not a thing with Dead City. This has been happening on like all the spinoffs and like even like the last however many seasons of The Walking Dead. Like it just feels like a character will die randomly way too fast, just because maybe the character doesn't really matter overall to the story, or it's just, again, it's more of a story thing, right? Like they're just like, well, we have to have this character die because we have to go here and the scene has to keep going. I just feel like it should be a little bit more realistic in that sense. But anyways, Hershel is the main character of the story, and yeah, he ends up missing here in this episode. He actually gets lost in Central Park and ends up on his own. And I think that the one thing that's really cool about Hershel is that he knows how to survive, and it's very believable because of a lot of the skills that he's learned, right? And we've seen the character on the show for a while now, and it makes sense that he would be, you know, in a place where he can actually survive on his own. So I think it was just kind of cool to see the character on his own like that. And honestly, it's something that, like, for the future, when you're thinking of like a next generation spinoff or something like that, right? Like, or a Walking Dead, you know, sequel or something, like you can picture this character being a leading character on that show. I think that that was one of the cool things that I really liked about the scene here. It was just like, it was crazy to see Hershel just like, you know, grown up and like killing walkers. And it was like, this is literally Glenn and Maggie's son, and he's out there surviving on his own. Like, it was just something that was just so cool to see. Now, going over to Negan's story with the Croat, I will say there was a lot of early reviews that said that Negan and Maggie were like separated for a lot of the season. It doesn't seem like that's really the case at all. Like in episode 4, it seems like they're gonna, you know, see each other, and Negan is somewhat there with the story. Like it makes sense that it's gonna take some time for those two characters to, you know, I guess be in the same scene together. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense for episode 1 for Maggie to go back to New York immediately and be reunited with him. And also, like, I think the characters are fine if they're not together constantly. Like you don't have to have them working together. I feel like that's just something that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like the story works really well right now. And I think that this is something that feels like, again, this feels like The Walking Dead season 12 in some ways. It really does. I think with those two characters specifically, if you had some other characters from The Walking Dead, Dead City is a show that feels like The Walking Dead season 12. It does. And I think having these two characters like separated in this way for a while, but then also Negan, you know, obviously sees Hershel here. He saw Hershel in last week's episode, I believe. And then Maggie also was aware of him and all of that. And we'll talk about that. But I feel like it just makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't really get the criticisms for that. I really don't. But it's funny when it comes to Negan's story, like, for him wanting to protect Hershel, and then we get the reveal in this episode where Hershel wants to kill him, right? And we'll talk about that because I think that's a really, honestly, big reveal there. But it's just interesting for Negan because I feel like his story so far, I think it's about to get going, but it's definitely been a little bit slower because he hasn't had a lot of dialogue. And that was the one thing I noticed, because in this episode, he actually had a lot more dialogue. And, you know, he's talking with the Croat, and we sort of learn a little bit of his backstory that, you know, he tried to go back home, but ended up on the shores of Manhattan, and the Dama was there and whatnot. So some cool backstory. Like, that's why more episodes work. Like, you can't do 6 episodes because you can have those scenes giving a backstory like that. And like, maybe an episode is slower, but I think that it's overall better for the story. I really do. Like, all of those scenes there were just absolutely incredible. And I feel like I understand the characters a lot more now. And, you know, to see Negan on his own as well and surviving, you know, on his own in the woods, or I guess it was Central Park, but you know, it was just really cool to see because we haven't seen that in a while. And again, he has more dialogue here, so it's just really cool to, you know, to see, because honestly, he's a really incredible character. And this was the first episode out of the last 3 episodes where I was like, okay, he's actually talking, right? Like, that was something that I think was missing out of the last couple of ones. I know he had that big speech there at the very end of episode 1, but this one here, I felt like we started to see the character there a little bit more. And I think the last 2, he just hasn't really fully been there, but it does make a lot of sense when you really think about the fact that, yeah, it's because he was doing something he didn't really want to do. And now he knows Hershel's there. He had this encounter, being on his own, this and that. Like, it makes sense that now he's starting to become his old self a little bit more, and I guess just being that character, right? So I think that honestly, overall, like, I think going forward, I'm really excited. I mean, honestly, episode 4 looks really, really good, and we do see Negan with Maggie, so I'm interested in how that's gonna play out because, yeah, of a few scenes that actually happened here in this episode. But going back to the other storyline, obviously they're all in New York City now, right? And they're trying to get to, I guess, Manhattan. And so they're going through Central Park, and, you know, going through all the tall grass and all of that was just really terrifying because you can't really see what you're doing or where you're going, right? And they actually end up in a new community here where we do learn of this new group here that is, I will say, very interesting, and obviously sort of reminds you of the Whisperers, or at least for me, that's what I thought of was the Whisperers. And I think it's just because anything that's a little bit more like natural and, you know, you're more, I guess, living with the zombies or the dead, you're more, I guess, associated with the Whisperers, right? Because that was a very, like, extreme belief, I would say, for The Walking Dead. This group isn't like that, but they're somewhat like that, right? Like, they believe in nature, and I guess just sort of, you know, like that one character actually says, you know, because Pearlie is just like, well, you know, we have medicine and whatever, like we have all these things, like, you know, that we can provide you, like with New Babylon if you join our organization, basically, right? And she's just like, you know what, like you have nothing to offer us that nature doesn't already have for us here. And I think that I really understood the group for the most part. Again, like it's one of those things where you're gonna have a lot of groups and communities that you're gonna run into on The Walking Dead that like are gonna have really crazy beliefs, and you're gonna be like, what is going on, right? And I understood a lot of where they were coming from until like the final scenes. I think that that whole ritual scene really freaked me out. Like I really didn't understand what was happening. And, you know, with where they sort of end the episode here, I'm curious if this group is going to play a role, you know, in the story going forward. I feel like maybe this was just an episode 3 thing, but I do think the group is likely going to play a role in the future. Like, even if it's not this season, it'll probably be something in season 3. I mean, I do feel like the group will be a part of the season in some way going forward. But yeah, it was just a really interesting group overall. And like, I have a lot of questions on how things work overall. I'll do a video on the group, I think, because I mean, it's a new community, right? A new group. And so I feel like we do have to sort of like get into all of that there. But let's actually get into a lot of like the big things of the episode here. So Hershel obviously is on his own, and he does find a fountain. And so, you know, Dama actually mentions, and this is sort of a really interesting thing when it comes to Hershel and Negan and Maggie and that whole story there of what happened to Hershel's father. And Dama in the flashback actually mentions, you know, what Negan did to his father, and Hershel acts like he doesn't care. He's just like, you know, like, I don't care about that, whatever. And he even acts like that at the very end of the episode with Maggie, but I really do feel like he does actually care. Like, I know he acts like, you know, I wasn't even alive for that time, so like, I don't care, right? But I think that's a lot of him just ignoring how he feels about the situation, because the second that he saw Negan, he wanted to kill him. And it was like this instant feeling he had where he was like, I have to kill him, right? Like, I think that that is how he feels about it, and I think that's why Negan is now worried about that. And I think, honestly, this was a really big reveal for the story, because we've been talking about this for a while. Like, how does Hershel really feel about Negan? Does he hate him? Does he want him dead? Or does he not care? And I think he acts like he doesn't care, because maybe he doesn't fully care, but when he saw him, he wanted him dead. And obviously, he didn't really know how to use the gun, so that's why, you know, he's not dead there in that situation. And Negan knew, like, he knew immediately once he saw Hershel and that happened, he was like, I gotta get out of here. So that's why he ran, right? But I think that that is a really crazy reveal for the story here, because I really wonder where that's going. Like, Hershel might want him dead. And if there's a scene where both the characters are like in a scene together, like, I feel like Hershel's gonna ask him a bunch of questions about like, why did you do that? And like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much there. There's so much anger, I feel like, towards him because of how much he has impacted his life. And I feel like that's the one thing for Hershel. He's probably looking at it more from his own perspective, where it's like, he has really destroyed our family. Like, because of him, my mom is not focused on me, and my father is not here, and all of that, right? So I think that Hershel is going to want him dead. Like, I know that he's acting like, you know, because he says later on to Maggie, like, you know, I don't really care, this and that. I think it's because he does feel ignored, and that's the big reveal here in this episode as well. Again, there was a lot of reveals with the character. Dama, you know, actually does sort of, like, when she's bringing all this stuff up, that is the dynamic there. It's a mother-son dynamic sort of thing where she really is very caring, you know, for Hershel, and shows that sympathy towards him. And like, you know, she's saying like, I understand you. I get you. I know where you're coming from because of all of this. And literally, like, Hershel's just like, yeah, like, you totally understand who I am. And it was honestly really cool to see all of this stuff just like actually said on the show, because it was something that obviously we sort of like talked about, I guess, in the past. Like, at the very end of season 1, Hershel was getting really mad at his mom, but like, you still kind of didn't really know everything fully. And this season here is really getting into all of this here, and we're seeing Maggie, I mean, honestly, I feel like actually ignore Hershel, because later on in the episode when Hershel tells Maggie, like they have that scene there where Hershel's like, yeah, Negan actually saved me. And yeah, and then Maggie immediately just asks about him, right? Completely ignores Hershel and like doesn't even really care about what's going on with Hershel. And Hershel's getting really mad, just like, I don't care about any of that. But Maggie just keeps asking and she gets so worked up about it. Like you can tell that she really does care about, not necessarily care about Negan, but like, I mean, I guess she does, right? Like, it's like what happened to him or where is he or what's going on. And Hershel just does not like that. And so I think that that's why there is that connection with Dama there. And I will say that's the one question I think that we should all be sort of having right now is Dama a villain? I know that at the very end, they sort of had that music there playing and like, you're sort of like, yeah, I guess she is a villain, but like, a lot of what she's saying makes a lot of sense. And I think that out of all the groups, I kind of get what she's saying overall, right? Like she doesn't really want to make New York the way it used to look or anything like that. She wants to create something, I guess better there, create a new vision here. And that was the whole reveal too with the elevator. I thought that was Maggie in the elevator just from the trailer, but that's actually like a room, which was insane. And Dama goes into this whole thing about like, we need to create something entirely new here. And, Hershel believes in that. And I think that that's the one thing that Hershel connects with. Like he looks at Manhattan and everything and it's just like, this place has been ignored and it's on its own. And now, we can actually, I guess, create something amazing for the future and ignore, what has happened and just focus on, creating a better future here. And I think that for Hershel, that's how he feels. He's just like, you know what? The future could be awesome. And I think that that is the one thing that he's focusing on right now. And it's really cool because this character has like his own motivations. Like it's not, like I feel like a lot of the kid characters on the show have, motivations that are very similar to like the parents and all that. But Hershel is really like a character on his own. He's doing his own things. And so, yeah, all the Dama scenes with Hershel, getting all the flashback stuff was just incredible to see all the reveals with Hershel and like, his anger for Negan and how he really feels about Maggie and like her obsession about Negan and all of that. I think it was a really cool reveal in this episode. Honestly, I think that like Hershel is an amazing character. And we saw at the end with Negan that, he goes back and obviously tells the Croat that, the person I was with just died and that was it, accidents happen. Well, I guess the Croat says that. And you could tell the Croat doesn't really believe him, but like, what else is he going to do, right? So, I think for Negan, like, I'm really curious on like where the character's story is going next, because I think that it is really connected with Hershel right now. And I'm really interested in seeing if he does become his old self and like how that's going to play a role when it comes to Hershel and Maggie being around. And we know that Lucille's going to show up at some point here this season. I'm just interested in that story because it seems like it's going to get really interesting this season here. But also, one thing I wanted to mention really quick, because, I think it makes a lot of sense, but it was something that, obviously it makes a lot of sense now that I'm thinking about it, but I just had to mention it because the character that dies in this episode, they take her heart out and everything, and she's a walker later, and for some reason I was just like, wait, what? Walkers don't need a heart, right? Like, obviously it makes a lot of sense, like I'm thinking of like Alpha's head and all of that, like it does make a lot of sense, but for some reason, just in that scene, it was just like, wait, what? What's going on right now? It's just like a big reveal, but obviously it's not. But I had to mention it because I made a note of it. But overall, this episode was my favorite of the season. I would say that this episode, honestly, is the best I've watched in a while. Definitely better than any episode I've seen on The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 2, and probably the best one that I've seen since, an episode in The Ones Who Live. I feel like there was probably an episode there that I liked better, obviously, but like this one was up there. Like it was definitely a really good episode. Like I actually like that scene there where Negan is like, why did the mainlanders cross the river? Because that's the episode title, right? And he says they didn't. And like just those type of jokes and just, with all of that with the character, it was so cool to see the character go back to who he is and all that and not see him so down all the time, right? So again, just a really awesome episode, some really big reveals here, some awesome character development. We met a new community here. There was just a lot of stuff in this episode that I really liked. And this episode here, if you haven't watched Dead City yet, I would say watch this episode and you'll probably want to go back and watch the last two, because honestly, it was a really great episode. But yeah, post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video and I'll see you in the next one.